Today, we've got familiar faces on the show. Dennis Bernstein, Julian Mongillo, and from FC Hockey, Dylan Galloway and Justin Froese. All talking first round of the NHL Entry Draft. Hit the music. Welcome to Jablam Sports Hockey, folks. I'm your host, Peter Amirov, and the mic is always on. You can find me on Twitter at Russia98. You can find the full show at Jablam Sports. If you have any questions or comments, please tweet us. Use the hashtag Jablam Sports. That's JABLAM Sports. Please subscribe to us if you haven't done so yet, and click on the three dots in your podcasting app. Share our show with three hockey fans you know. Thank you, everyone. Remember, check out our website, go to jablamsports.com, see all our podcasts, and even game notes for each episode. You'll get links to all the things we mentioned on this show, including guests. For our podcasts, click on podcasts, and then hockey on this show specifically right on our website. Now for Trending Now, we have Dennis Bernstein back on the show. You can find him on Twitter at Dennis at TFP. That's, of course, thefourthperiod.com, where you can find him there. His website, of course, his podcast at Kings of the Pod. And you can also find him on SiriusXM for hockey, The Hot Stove Show. Dennis, welcome back to the show.
PB, great to be with you again, man. Happy to talk after a somewhat long night, the NHL draft.
For sure. This draft just took forever. I don't know if they planned it this long, but why? Like, I guess because of Zoom and everything, they had to do 5 minutes for everybody before their picks.
Yeah, and everybody took 5 minutes, Pete. It looked that way. And Toronto ran out of time. They were going to take a timeout. So the technology, hopefully a one-time thing.
Yeah.
We're back to normal next year, and we'll be in an arena, maybe in Montreal or somewhere or so. I think it's just people struggling with the technology. And if you watch the telecast, just a delay. They would cut to the player's home, and they'd be sitting there for 30 seconds or a minute. It was tough, but we got through it. But yeah, it was a little longer than we thought.
For sure. Before we talk a little bit more about the draft and the first two picks, which we'll be talking about, congratulations and thank you for all your work during the playoffs and in the bubble.
Sure.
How was being in the bubble?
Well, as an American, Peter, I had to spend 14 days in a hotel room.
Yeah.
Under quarantine, right? And there's a guy who wrote for the Dallas Morning News, Matt DeFranks, who was turned away at the border. He went in through Vancouver, got turned away, and they said, "You're not an essential worker. You have to leave the country." They made him go to a hotel. They said if he didn't come back to the airport, they would send out a warrant for his arrest. I was lucky. I went through Calgary. I looked a little sketchy to the customs guy, said go talk to the health people.
Yeah.
But a very nice lady did a little interview with me, a little questionnaire. I told them I was going to the DoubleTree in Edmonton, stayed there for 14 days, and they let me in. So that was the first 14 days, and the first night was a real challenge. I hadn't been away from home for a month, and I can't remember how long. So that was a challenge mentally. How am I going to go through this grind? But I got Instacart. I ordered some groceries. The DoubleTree was awesome. They gave me a one-bedroom suite, so it wasn't like I just had a hotel room. I had a sitting area with a big screen TV, so that was cool. And then when we got to the 14 days and we got to the Cup final, the timing was perfect. My quarantine ended with one starting. Peter, it was a unique experience. It was totally weird being in an arena that was ice cold and frigid with no fans. It was really, really weird. I think the more weird thing, though, was around the arena. You're talking about Edmonton, which is a hotbed for hockey in a country that where the game's origin is, and you could not tell the Stanley Cup final was going on.
Yeah.
Basically, I would leave the arena after the game. It would be desolate around the arena, and they're building this ice district. There would be nobody around. I'd we'd hang out at a restaurant maybe about a couple hundred meters from the arena. It's about half full. That was the weirdest thing for me, is that you could never tell the Stanley Cup was going on, and this is in Canada. It's not like it was in Tampa or Dallas where it may not have attention. So that was really, really weird. So. But I got a better appreciation and understanding for what these players went through. to the final. Now, here's who my heart goes out for. Look, it's great that Steven Stamkos won, and the celebration was kind of cool when they had all the players around. But imagine being a Dallas Star right now, going through all that and not winning, coming in second. Like, my heart goes out to, like, Jamie Benn and Tyler Seguin and all those guys because they went through the same process. I can't see how we're going to do this again, Peter, though. I know that there's, tonight they said that they're going to move back to start of the season, hopefully January 1st. The players aren't going to go in a bubble again. We've got, maybe there'll be a Canadian division or whatever. It was a very unique situation. I'm glad I experienced it. I was only one of 3 American media in the building. I would never do it again. There's no way. And my wife joked with me. She says, well, if LA was in it, you live in LA, you cover the Kings. The Kings were in the final, and this happened again. When you do it, I go, nope. This is a one-time only situation. It only was physically tough because, Pete, when you go through the Stanley Cup playoffs, you're going to get beat up. Right, you're gonna have injuries. You're not after 2 months, but the mental aspect of this year was very, very different. They did have options, some entertainment options, but how many times can you watch a movie? How many times can you go to the golf simulator? By the end, these guys were just. It was a true battle of attrition. And for anybody out there that wants to say this is an asterisk, this was the hardest Stanley Cup to win of all time. Just all the weirdness going around, nobody in the building, having to be secure away from everybody. It was just strange, weird. I wrote a column for the fourth period this week. It was like the NHL version of the Twilight Zone. That's what it really was. It was just so weird. And I just pray that, look, I believe that COVID-19 is a 2020 event. Once we get to 2021, things will normalize. And hopefully once the season starts, things will be back to normal. Maybe not all the fans in the building to start, but I can't see the league going through this again. It was a very, very difficult time, not only for the players, but all the support staff. This was support staff that got there before the players did. So people that work for the NHL were probably in the bubble for 3 months. And that was just really, really difficult. So, and then you see, of course, yesterday, the Edmonton Oilers report Connor McDavid contracted COVID-19. So a very difficult, unique experience, weird. I'm glad I got to experience it, but I would never do it again. You couldn't pay me to do it again. It was just very, very difficult.
Yeah, I have a few work colleagues, of course, in television and everything, and camera and crew people who had to be in the Toronto bubble. And I know with everything going on, everybody's anxiety levels aren't great. And it just seemed like it was even an extra level. And you don't know what you can do and how to react, and being so isolated from everybody else and family and friends.
Right. And they probably had to be tested. I didn't have to be tested. All they did with me was a temperature check, and they would ask me when I came in the building if I had any symptoms. So I didn't have to do any physical testing for COVID-19, but I wasn't sick to begin with. So it was a very unique, weird, hopefully once in a lifetime thing that we're all going through.
Yeah. It does seem like there's a few inklings of rumors of other actual NHL players that weren't really happy with it as well.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So I don't know what they're gonna do with the next season, and because I know dollars and cents won't be great if there's not enough fans in the building, and if they're doing bubbles again. I don't know how.
Well, the first thing, Pete, they got to overcome is the 14-day quarantine. Mm-hmm. Like, if the Canadian government doesn't change the rules, I mean, that's why the Blue Jays played in Buffalo this year.
Yep.
If they do not change the rules, you're going to have a Canadian division to start.
Yep.
Because you can't bring people over the border. Now, hopefully that changes in the next 3 months and we see some clarity and maybe they'll relax it a little bit. But if that doesn't change, then you can't start the season. You can't start the season unless you just have the Canadian teams play each other, and then maybe if you got the schedule later in the season, they'll play some other teams.
Yeah, maybe a Canadian division for the first 2 months. We'll see.
Yeah, exactly.
There was a fairly big trade right before the draft, a couple of hours before the draft, and that was Max Domi, a third-round pick to Columbus for Josh Anderson. Mm-hmm. Before we nail down the trade, is there something that I'm not seeing with maybe managers not really liking the personality maybe of Max?
Well, I think if you looked at his usage in the series against Philadelphia, he was playing one night. I think he played 9. He's playing 14 minutes. If he's a top 6 forward, he's not playing 14 minutes. I think it's a sense of stop. Plus, the kids in the middle, like, he's a center, right? Yeah. But Kakanyemi and Suzuki played great. Philip Danault was your third your 3C, although he's not happy about that. So maybe Kakiniemi might be your 3C. Mm-hmm. But he's a better center than wing, and his usage, Claude, you just didn't use him enough. So it wasn't surprising if you look at his usage that he would be the odd man out. Now, look, Columbus needs a 2C, and his one great season, he was a 70-point player as a center a couple seasons ago, and they're hoping that he's the guy. And they traded a guy who was injured, who had one plus, one over 20 goal season. So there's risk on both sides, but I understand the trade because the Habs wanted more size, and they're going to get that with Josh Anderson.
For sure. All right, now for the draft. Nothing really shocking, especially in the first top five. But, of course, Lafreniere goes to the Rangers first overall. It looks like a good timed fit for the Rangers with their progression and getting much better and all their other core young players with their goalies and Capocacco, and now they have Lafreniere.
Yeah, and they have access on the left side now. And remember, Bretman is a right shot playing the left side, so he can hop over to the right side. But they had Bretman and Kreider, who they re-signed on the left side, and Alexi is a left winger as well. But my assumption would be you can move him over to the right side, Panarin, and you would have Lafreniere, Zibanejad, and Panarin. That would be scary. Mm-hmm. I mean, and clearly, and there was some chat up at them. LA talked to them about possibly moving up, maybe exchanging. But Alexis is clearly the best player in this draft, clearly. Mm-hmm. And so the Rangers didn't have a choice, but they're going to get a great player in him. Some people project like 60 points, 30 and 30 next year for this guy. If he's playing with Zibanejad and Panarin, I might be able to get 20 and 20, and I can't skate, right? So it's going to be a dangerous, entertaining run-up, and he's in a great city. For the first overall pick to go to New York and play in Madison Square Garden with the star players they have, that's going to augur really well for them. So I think it was a no-brainer, and I think it was something. Jeff Gordon's a little coy, like, why don't you tune in at 7 o'clock to see who we're going to pick? It was always going to be Alexis Lafreniere. The one X factor was, there was some talk, Larry Brooks in the New York Post said that they may not qualify Ryan Strome, and Ryan Strome's the second-line center. So there was some thought that maybe they go to Byfield at the 2 because they need more help at center. Not sure what's going to happen with Ryan Strome in New York, whether they qualify him or not. But he's clearly the best player in this draft, and he'll have fun in New York and be playing with a very entertaining team.
Well, for sure. And then the LA Kings draft second overall, Quentin Byfield, who is exactly what we all thought, even when we had our talk and we were talking and you mentioned time before that the Kings would probably draft him second overall.
He's 17 years old. He's 6'4", 222, I think right now. He said on a Zoom call. He's one of the fastest skaters in the draft. He projects to be Kopitar. And I know Kopitar well. I said, hey, look, they drafted the next you. Yeah. And he said, I hope so. So, yeah, like who better to learn from than Andrei Kopitar, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, there's some question. Well, he's not going to be a primetime player this season, even though the Kings, were 30th and didn't have a very good season and they were not very good offensively. He's not going to be a primetime player this year. But if he can go to training camp, learn from Kopi, I'm not sure what they'll do with him. The challenge with him, Peter, is that, if he goes back to the OHL, what's that going to do for his development? Mm-hmm. Nothing. He's going to dominate there. So maybe you send him to Europe, play against men in Europe, and that might be a little bit better off for him next season. So, look, if he has the opportunity to make the team, you might want to play him. But I think clearly they were always going to pick him. I know there was a lot of chatter about Stützle, but I just didn't see it because when you have a guy who projects to Kopitar or Malkin or Eric Stahl, you pick that player. And he's so fast, and he's young. He's, I think, the second youngest kid in the draft class. He has a lot to grow on. Look, there's some spatial awareness he has to learn with respect to that, maybe some maturity. But he's 17 years old, and that's part of the issue, Peter, is that we're talking about 17-year-old kids here and 18-year-old kids. Like, you got to give them time to grow and develop, and they're still growing into their bodies. And, it's funny, we had Mark Ionetti on Kings of the Podcast, who's the director of amateur scouting for LA, and he said, when you start looking at kids so many times, you just notice their flaws and all the great things they do. Like, yeah, sure, all these kids have flaws. They're 17 years old, but, you got to give these guys a break. To me, he's the number 2. We had Greg Button on our Sirius XM show. He said the same thing about Byfield. I think they always were going to take him. Now, look, Stützle may be Patrick Kane, and that's great. But I think when you have Kopitar and Byfield and Gabe Velarde down the middle, that could be powerful. And, by the time the two kids mature, and then only that, you can move Velarde to the right wing. Velarde could be a guy like Tyler Toffoli, who was drafted as a center. You can move over to the right wing. You might have a 30-goal scorer. What do you do with Alex Turcotte? What do you do with Jared Dolan Anderson? So I just think that he was the best player available to. They made the pick, but I always thought they were going to go with Quentin Byfield. So they're going to get a star player. They're going to get also, an ethnic player. He's black in a big cosmopolitan city like Los Angeles. He'd be a big star. They also drafted Akil Thomas, which is great. So, the diversity of this team is going to be, they're one of the leaders in diversity right now. Have two black players who would be playing in this team in a couple of years. So I think it's the right move. I like the pick for them. And to be honest with you, they couldn't go wrong. Mm-hmm. If they went with Stützle, the kid's going to be a star and do a lot of great things in Ottawa as well. I just think when you have a kid with that size and that skill and that speed, you can develop him, and he should be around for 12 to 15 years, skating Los Angeles as a star.
Yeah. I noticed in the Sportsnet broadcast, it was interesting that Brian Burke mentioned that Byfield uses a short stick. But for a player with his style, excellent power and reach, I would think it would be better for him to play with at least above average stick length.
Well, that's what you do in development, though, Pete, right? I mean, the Kings are going to get a hold of him. They're going to look at every aspect of his game because they didn't really interview him. He never met with him personally. He never saw him on the ice. So I think they'll pick out all the things they need to do with respect to development. And I think that if you look at his numbers, he's doing okay with a short stick. Yeah. I think that spacing issue, that's what you got addressed with in Delta. And I'm sure they can improve his skating style as well if they need to. He's so fast. It's just he's a little bit hunched over when he skates. So they'll critique all that, and that's what you use the year or so for development. But the raw potential of this kid is off the charts.
Yeah, you talked about developing the players and giving them time to grow. And then you also mentioned about being players like maybe, and I've talked about it before and with other interviews, players maybe being loaned to Europe because their leagues are already starting and they're already going. Right. Do you feel a lot of some of these prospects might be actually entertaining, and teams will be entertaining and actually sending some of them to Europe to play?
Yeah, well, the Kings send 4 prospects over to skate in Germany, but they have the connection with the Berlin team, as Baden-Berlin, so that's kind of easy. I think so, and I think what you saw also is the Russian kid who got picked by Toronto.
Yeah,
he moved up the chart because he was playing, and he was playing well, right? And Hendrix Lapierre, his first preseason game, he had 2 goals and 2 assists, and he looks healthy. So I do think that to get a jump on this, and with the uncertainty around this, this league and the AHL, I do think you'll see prospects going to Europe. I think it's a good move for these players to go over there and get some ice time.
For sure. You can find him on Twitter at DennisTFP. Dennis, thank you for coming on the show again.
Always a pleasure, Pete. Thanks for the time. I appreciate it.
Now to chat more draft, we have Julian Mongillo. He's the LA Kings writer and scout for Dobber Prospects, and of course covers the Colorado Avalanche for The Hockey Writer. You can reach him on Twitter at Julian Mongillo. Julian, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me back. I guess I didn't do too bad of a job the first time around, so my first round. So I'm happy to be back.
Yeah. So speaking about rounds and coming back, we finally get the NHL draft. How did you enjoy the draft tonight?
Long awaited couple months there from the anticipated June draft, but came nonetheless. I thought they did a pretty good job considering everything going on in the world. I liked a little bit of the videos they put in there with Howard Chuck's wife. It was a nice touch, and even Alex Trebek for the Ottawa Senators' first selection. So a little bit of fun and games there, and a nice little tribute to the late Howard Chuck. And but all in all, I think it was a really good turnout, considering everybody still being able to, with the video chat, see their families and their reactions, because I think that's a big part of the draft is being able to see that reaction when their name's finally called. So all in all, I think it was a good broadcast.
The last guy who was just picked, I think they had they were going nuts at home. So that's one thing you don't get to see when they're at the draft, wherever they are. Like this year, they were supposed to do it at Montreal, but now they're doing it from home. So they're actually having a bit of like a home party family vibe. Whereas over there you go and maybe you might have an aunt or an uncle or a grandpa there with your brother and sister and your parents. But now you have a little bit of a party at home thing going on, and some of them, they're just going nuts.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big day for them for sure. So I don't blame them, but it's pretty funny to see that going on. I mean, they got to obviously be a little bit more composed when they're and professional when they're in the arenas, but it's no holds barred when they're at home, I guess. And I actually saw one of the pics. I think it was Dylan Holloway.
Mm-hmm.
The little delayed on the virtual thing. He ended up getting a text before they even saw it on the TV. So that was pretty funny because he kind of like looked at everybody. Oh, it's the Oilers, and then and then he saw it on TV, and then there was the reaction. So that was pretty funny.
Yeah, it would have been really funny if there was drunk uncle just plaster, just like yeah.
I mean, I'm sure they were there, but they probably kept them off on the side of the camera view there.
Yeah, for sure. That would have been hilarious. All right. Speaking about interesting also videos and stuff and introductions, for the Maple Leafs, you had Mitch Marner kind of with his goofy smile making the pick for the Leafs at 15th overall for Amirov. And even Riley in the background just turning over the jersey. And of course, it's kind of awkward with all the videos and all of the people kind of how they put the jersey out. It kind of looks awkward. And Riley didn't do too bad of a job at that. How did you think with that pick?
I mean, I kind of caught a lot of people might have caught off guard. I think after the 12th pick, I kind of saw a lot of it was like a lot of off the board picks, maybe if you would classify them as that. I think it was more a lot more specific picks than people thought that the draft board was going to go. So that Amirov one kind of took people off guard, especially me. I think they've done a lot with the Leafs, especially have done a lot with their European scouting in the last couple of years. Mm-hmm. Scouting guys like Zaitsev and Soshnikov and all these guys kind of coming over from even Liljegren, a lot of European skaters. So I think they trust that part of their staff. And I mean, there wasn't much to go on statistic wise, but he's a left winger. So a lot of people may have thought they would turn to a guy like Braden Schneider, who's a right shot defenseman, plays a physical game, especially after the news coming out with Dubas saying that he wants to make a harder team to play against, right? So I think that was kind of a head scratcher a bit to see them pass on him for a guy who's not really, I mean, a household name, I guess, if you could say, but he was ranked 5th in European scouting. So, I mean, this early, it's hard to tell. I would say he's about 3 years away from cracking the lineup anyway. So you never know what could come of that. And some great players come out of the KHL. So hopefully the Leafs scored on that one.
For sure. I thought it was kind of weird that, and I think they mentioned it on air, the Sportsnet guys like Berkey and them, about Europeans and Russians, like even for myself, more and more are going to be maybe drafted a little bit higher, given the fact that they've already kind of started their leagues this season, mm-hmm. and the players over here in North America won't be able to grow and develop at least till maybe their season coming up in January. So with him taking, I think, mm-hmm. Mukhamadullin, right, as well, and some of the others, I guess, I can't remember if it was him or if it was another player. Everybody was just shocked that this player was taken off the board, right, so early.
Yeah, I think that does have a little bit of a play considering everything, and you've kind of seen it with a lot of the teams have started to just loan players over there just for the time being, just to get them, training with the team, some ice work. So I know even the Kings specifically sent a handful of players out to different parts of Europe, in Sweden, Finland, places like that, and just they'll probably return once the season starts and they get back to training camps opening. But for the time being, any extra ice, any extra training, that's what they need. So, I mean, I'm sure it did have a little bit of a play, but there was obviously the most Canadians drafted, I think, in this one as well. But but there's definitely a push coming from the European side.
Yeah, I didn't see like any Finns or anything really.
Not as many as last year, for sure. No.
Yeah, barely any. So who do you feel that was drafted so far as a big steal?
Big steal. I kind of like what the Flames did, and in trading down twice to get 2 extra assets in the third round of this year's draft. So I think what they did was really good, and they were able to get a good guy like Connor Zary. I don't know what overall it was now. I think it was somewhere in the mid-20s. I think they ended up getting. But they moved down, got 2 more assets, and they were able to get a pretty good player in Zary. I think he's a good defensive forward. He plays center, good 2-way game. So I think he was pretty good. And another one has had a lot of hype was the Hendrix Lapierre of Washington. Ended up trading to acquire him from the Flames picks. And he had some concussion issues and back and forth with those. But apparently they've confirmed that they've worked on that, and it was actually a neck issue. So hopefully that's something that doesn't hold him back. And if it's something that doesn't, then he could be one of those steals and home run ball plays of the draft this year.
Mm-hmm. Is there any draft pick do you think that really stands out and will be probably really good from where he was picked?
Well, besides the top 3 guys, I mean, Byfield was one that we talked about before on our other podcast that we did. Just him and the way he fits into that organization, I think, is something that they don't have down the middle, and I think it was a big need that they ended up filling with a big body 6'4" guy like Byfield, who's even 10 months younger than everybody in this draft. So even room to grow, like we said. So that's a good fit that I really liked. They ended up picking him, but Ottawa obviously got a great player in Stützle at the 3rd pick, and even that whole exchange there at the 4th pick where I think it was Lucas Raymond went to the Red Wings, kind of caught people off guard, and then that kind of slid Drysdale down to a team like the Ducks, where they were really forward heavy in their prospect pool, and were able to get what was supposed to be the number 1 defenseman drafted in Drysdale. So I think they got a pretty good steal at this number 6 spot, even though they were a high pick. And then another one I would probably watch would be Justin Barron of the Avalanche selection. He had some issues with blood clots and had to actually get a surgery done. So he hasn't got much playing time through the last season. So, but Joe Sakic from the top of the organization down to the bottom, they build their team on character guys, looking at Landeskog, McKinnon, and then even Kel McCarr, character guys stemming from Sakic himself. So Barron's another one of those guys, and he plays a really good defensive game, both ends of the ice. He took a step back a little bit offensively, but that could have been, again, from that injury. So look for him to come back and see if that could be another home run play for Joe Sakic. For
sure. You can find him on Twitter at Julian Mongillo. Thanks for coming on the show, Julian.
Thanks, Peter. Hopefully we do this again. Take it easy. Stay safe.
Now to talk more draft, we have Dylan Galloway back on the show, the head scout for Eastern Canada at FC Hockey, covering the NHL draft and previously assisting the London Knights with analytics. You can reach him on Twitter at DylanGalloway_. Dylan, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Peter. Nice to be back.
Yeah, for sure. And how did you enjoy the draft? It felt a little too long for the first round, or was it just me?
I think it was every single team taking their entire 5 minutes. I mean, I know it's Zoom draft, but it was a little bit long. But there were some good shocks, and there was some interesting banter to talk about.
What really stood out for you? Was it maybe the Alex Trebek making the Stützle pick for them at 3rd overall, or was it maybe Rossi falling to the Wild?
I mean, Trebek was an interesting appearance on the show. I was not expecting that. But yeah, definitely for me, it was Rossi at 9. Specifically with Quinn going over Rossi's draft position. Mm-hmm. It's not often you see a player that plays lower in the lineup on a junior team getting drafted ahead of their teammate. Rossi at 9 is incredible value for Wild fans. You should be stoked about getting Marco Rossi at number 9. He's incredibly intelligent center. It's yet to be seen, obviously, whether he'll play center at the NHL level. I think he can do it. Being 5'9", there might not be a lot of coaches that will be a fan of that. But with his smarts, his competitiveness, the habits that he displays on the ice in terms of stick positioning, passing ability, defensive awareness, and an ability to reload and get back in the back check and use the stick smartly, like almost like a Mark Stone type of hand-eye coordination with the stick. He's a Crosby, Bergeron, Mark Stone type, in my opinion. Not necessarily that highly skilled as a generational player like Crosby, but he has all of those abilities. And like I said, getting that at 9, the Wild fans should be ecstatic.
Wow. Which player do you think could really surprise and be ready for the upcoming season whenever that begins?
Yeah, honestly, I mean, outside of Lafreniere and Byfield being a player I've said publicly that I think he could use another year of seasoning. Mm-hmm. I think Rossi, he might be one of the few players that you see that gets drafted outside of the top, 2 or 3 that sees NHL time in his first drafted year. When you have a player of that level of skill, I honestly think that he could jump right into the NHL and play bottom 6 minutes, mm-hmm. probably. But I don't think coaches will be as wary of his defensive capabilities, and they'll be more likely to trust him at the NHL level than they would players who might have some defensive flaws. Like, Byfield is defensively aware, and I honestly one of the best defensively aware players from the OHL. But sometimes you see Lafreniere as well doing the two-legged stork stand on the way back to his defensive zone. So, I think Rossi is probably that player.
Yeah. Speaking about Rossi and Lafreniere, do you think with everything going on right now and the season kind of starting a little bit later, do you think there might be more or maybe less players that are just recently drafted playing in the season right after their draft year?
That's a tough question. I think Lafreniere will definitely play mm-hmm. For New York when the season starts. I don't see him going over to Europe or anything like that. Yeah. I could see Byfield going over to Europe. I don't know if he's quote unquote ready for the NHL at this point. So that's a player you could see go over. It sounds like Ottawa wants to bring Stützle over immediately. So you know what? I think there's probably like 3 to 5 players I could see jumping straight into the NHL, mm-hmm. And maybe not looking back. So yeah, like that's quite a bit more than you usually get with maybe 1 or 2 players coming out of a draft and jumping straight in the NHL.
For sure. We talked a little bit about it just before recording. For guys who fell a bit, you think Mercer and Bork are 2 guys that could really be good steals for their spots, eh?
I really do think that. It seems like some of the Q guys were a little underrated as you got through the middle part of the draft. There were some surprise Russian players that got selected ahead of them. But I really think Dawson Mercer is a hell of a pick at 18?
18 by New Jersey for sure.
Yeah, that's a great pick. Don't know if he'll play center at the NHL level, but really, really intelligent kid. He needs to work on his skating. He's got cement boots a little bit heavy. So I think if he improves that, his intelligence, his passing ability, and his two-way smarts. He's really good in his own defensive zone. He's really committed to defense. So again, that's another player that coaches really love. And I think that he'll just outperform that 18th overall pick. And then, same with Bork. Bork was one of the players I kept shouting at my TV tonight saying, okay, he's got to go here. Okay, he's got to go here. And he fell all the way to the Dallas Stars at 30. Yeah. I mean, Dallas Stars fans, you get a Stanley Cup final appearance, disappointing, but you get to, lick your wounds and do that with a kid like Maverick Bork. I don't think that's a bad second prize for you at all. The kid is highly, highly creative with the puck. He's got a really whippy shot. And just really, really great offensive threat. In my opinion, he's got really great speed and incredible creativity with the puck. So getting a player like that at 30 is an absolute steal.
In the top 5, there weren't really any shockers except for maybe slightly Sanderson. Why so? Or is it just too obvious to pick those guys?
Yeah, I'd say top 5 this year was pretty locked and loaded. Mm-hmm. You had a couple guys making their names heard with a Rossi or Perfetti, making their way into that realm. Even Askarov had his name thrown around there. But you definitely had the 3 and Lafreniere, Byfield, and Stützle right there. Raymond was always going to be in the mix there too. So it was really that 5th pick that was the question mark. Ottawa had been tied to them previously, and I know that they had taken Shane Pinto of UND last year, and Jake Sanderson's headed to UND this year. So there's a connection there. Ottawa does like to take their American players every now and again. So it's not necessarily off the board. I just know that at future considerations, we had Sanderson ranked at 12. And I personally had Jamie Drysdale as the best defender in the draft. Mm-hmm. So seeing a player like Jake Sanderson go above Marco Rossi, Cole Perfetti, and Jamie Drysdale, definitely a little bit more surprising than you usually get.
You can find him on Twitter at Dylan Galloway _ Dylan, thank you for coming on the show again.
Thanks, Peter.
Also from Future Considerations Hockey, now we have on the show Justin Froese. You can find him on Twitter at Froese.FC. He's the head of Western Canadian Scouting for FC Hockey. Justin, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on. I mean, we're almost in the late show. I thought I was getting a call from Jay Leno, but here we are. We're talking about post-draft finally after that long run up to it, hey?
Oh, for sure. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. Of course, everybody listening to this is listening to it on draft day number 2, but we're recording all these interviews and talking everything about the draft after that long draft. Man, it took a while to do this. I guess they had to give them 5 minutes for every Zoom call.
Hey, you need a platform. You need to draw it out and maybe get a little bit more followership, anything to make it sort of a different performance. Nothing's going to ever replace kind of the main production that they have leading up to it. But I think you're making the best of a poor scenario that we're in as a society right now. And I mean, what else can you do? It sucks not being able for those kids to throw on the jersey and get the handshakes and the first rate on the spot and just all the memories that come along with draft weekend. But it is what it is. One day these kids, it'll be just a stepping stone on their way to hopefully future NHL success for every one of them.
What I did like, though, is we got to see more of them being with their families and a bit more of a party feel and how they would more so react being drafted to the NHL, whereas kind of you're a little more rigid and always having to wear the suit and everything being in the hockey arena for the draft. So I kind of like that.
There's certain kids that are definitely, and different, I shouldn't say kids, anybody's obviously a little bit more comfortable in their own element. And I mean, it was a little bit more unique this year. There was obviously some awkward moments, but I mean, even when you're looking at like the explosion for the Weisblatt household after, then even some of these other big celebrations, it was awesome to see. It's pretty cool. Being a traditionalist, I know a lot of people like to go down the draft and kind of see those interactions, and even probably a lot more deals were likely to get done if there was just guys walking around on the draft floor and kicking up dust. But it is what it is at the end of the day. It was pretty cool from basically a test run for doing something like this at that magnitude.
Yeah, we didn't really see any trades except for the Domi one prior to, but during it was like, all right, so Calgary just taking their time and knowing that nobody else is going to draft this kid that they're doing, so they're just picking up and recouping some extra third-round picks.
No, it was really smart management. I think once you got past that unsurprising group of 12 that were all going to go probably in that mix, and there was really only Jack Quinn that jumped up and kind of supplanted maybe a few guys that I thought would have gone ahead of him. But after that, there was a lot of kids who were in that next tier that could really, depending on the team picking, their definition of upside would have kind of changed and hinged a little bit. So, I mean, for a team that saw a kid like Connor Zary, what they had in kind of a tier of their own, I mean, if they're looking to stock the cupboards, this is the kind of, just with the depth of this draft, it's here to do it. If you can move back a couple spots and pick up another couple darts in the middle rounds where there is some talent that's going to be had, I mean, why not? Really smart asset management by Brad Treliving. And I'm really surprised a few more teams with multiple picks didn't do that to trade down, get a little bit more value, and still get their guy, which they could have at the end of the day.
Yeah, so they really wanted Zary, it looks like. What do you like about his game?
For me, Zary, I mean, and I tweeted it out, but it looks like Brad Treliving. I don't know if he copied exactly what I said, but the first thing that came out of my mouth is Swiss Army knife. I mean, he's a feisty kid who likes to play in the high danger zones. He's really gritty on the wall, but he loves to play within the dots. And I mean, he's not the quickest guy. His first 3 steps and his agility need to improve a little bit, but his skating's come a long way. I don't think it'll ever be the strong suit of it, but it hasn't helped. It hasn't hurt his ability to play in transition, move pucks to space, and just generate different angles of the attack and layer how his team generates offense. There's a lot of different tools at his disposal. He can play around the net, on the rush, on the cycle, behind the net with creativity, finish pucks off. And I mean, there's a little bit of a nastiness side to his game as well. And that fire and competitive streak that lies in him, it comes every shift. And I mean, with him, you can watch him night in and night out, flying around the ice like a Seth Jarvis type of kid. But there's a lot of method to his madness. And I mean, he's a guy who that you hear the reference a lot to, where I value guys who are playing checkers or playing chess when others are playing checkers, and he's always paying attention to the details of the game, timing plays just about perfectly. And I think he'll be able to the next level and kind of claw his way up to be a middle 6 guy in that Calgary lineup, and potentially part of a young core where he's the guy who's going to be performing under pressure.
Yeah, another kid who I think it might be a little bit similar, has a bit of an old school feel to him, a bit more grit with talent, might be similar to a Marchand type, is maybe Jake Neighbors, who were drafted right after 26 spot for the Blues. Yeah,
he's put into perspective. He is basically the Volkswagen from the Happy Gilmore movie. He's a fairly quick kid. He's not a lot of natural offensive talent, but I think there's a lot in his box there are a lot in his toolkit that's yet to be revealed. I mean, he's a smart kid, plays the game the right way, high level of competitiveness, and I mean, he's playing a 200-foot game where he's invested in getting in on the forecheck, being really hard to play against, cutting off defenders' hands, just inserting himself and immersing himself into play and into offensive chances, driving the net, attacking space. But he's also a guy who's going to be the first one back on his horse to negate play and create disruptions on the counterattacks and just have a good active stick. I mean, if you want a kid who plays the game the right way and embodies what a hard worker is, he was one of my favorites to watch this year. I think for me, maybe the offensive upside isn't as much as a guy like Ozzy Weisblatt, who was picked right behind him, or even Ridley Gregg, who I think he's got a few more warts in his game than those two combined. But I think with Jake Neighbors, you got a guy who's going to be a really solid third line player. But he also can move up and down the lineup to provide that second layer of offense that is really valuable when you are playing a salary cap world.
The first Western kid drafted goes 13th overall to the Carolina Hurricanes. That's Seth Jarvis from Portland.
Yeah, no, he's an unbelievable player, and like he was a guy too that I likened his game a lot to how Braden Point and Matt Barzal came up. Just a multi-dimensional player who layers deception, can multitask, and play a really hard inside game for a small player. Once he adds a few more pounds on his frame, when he's matching up against hard physical defenders, he's going to be just an absolute handful to contain inside the high danger zones of the ice. He moves the pucks to space. I mean, just an incredible IQ to his game, and just a multifaceted player who's unselfish but knows how to get in and get himself in the scoring areas or move the puck to space. And just a lot of different options that he's able to create just by moving his feet and using his knowledge to create the time plays and create with just detailed picks and detailed passes that he's able to either do on transition or just working the offensive zone. And I mean, even on the back end of the game, like he's an honest competitor who's there is times where he vacates his own a little bit. They had him listed as a center. He's naturally a right winger. He was playing with Jack O'Brien, who's a 2021 eligible. And I mean, for a bunch of U18 kids, almost putting up 100 points at the WHL level for him was quite phenomenal. And he was doing it while playing an honest two-way game. And I think Carolina, I have a buddy who actually scouts for him. He's a UFC alumni and or not UFC, FC alumni. And I know talking with him, they were really high on him going very high in this draft. So I kind of figured if some of those high names didn't fall in the draft, he would be there for him. And it turns out it just worked out perfect.
Sounds great. All right. You can find him on Twitter at Froese.FC. Justin, thank you for coming on the show today.
Thanks, Peter. I'll talk to you later. Much appreciated.
Well, we finally got to the draft, and boy, it was a long night. Long draft, and then doing all these interviews tonight. I want to thank all our guests today. Interesting to hear what Dennis had to say and what everyone went through in the bubble. That was pretty cool. Also, to hear more details about draft night and some of the skills that these young lads are bringing to their new professional teams. Thank you, everybody. For the next two episodes, we'll be talking all about NHL free agency. And of course, I'm expecting some big trades, so we'll talk about that. And EA Sports' release of the new NHL 21 game, so look out for more on that, and also maybe even an interview from the voice of NHL 21, James Sabalski, and maybe even some Chell Tourney players. Remember, go to our website, jablamsports.com, to see all our podcasts and even game notes for each episode, including this one. You'll get all our guests' infos and links to the things we mentioned on this show. Please subscribe, rate, and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And click on the three dots in your podcasting episode and share this episode with 3 friends. If you want to contact us, if you have any questions or ideas for the show, you can follow me on Twitter at Russian98 or the entire team at Jablam Sports. You can also use the hashtag Jablam Sports, that's JABLAM Sports. You can go to our contact page on our website as well, jablamsports.com/contact. Thank you, everyone. This week's shout out is to Dennis Bernstein. He's a talented and hardworking individual, and I want to thank him for always being there to talk to and for joining our show. He has great professionalism and he's a great role model. Thank you, Dennis. And to every single one of our followers and listeners, I'm giving you a virtual hug. Stay healthy, listen, be yourself, and stay strong.